Oracle Cloud User Management. Hi, my name's Scott Walls. In this video, you'll learn not just how to add users, but you'll learn about the 4 key different types of data or information that you're going to need in order to add a user. So let's get started. Okay, slide 1. What is a user in Oracle Cloud ERP? Well, for the purposes of this conversation or presentation, an Oracle Cloud user is anyone who can access Oracle Cloud ERP with a valid password and username. Slide 2, types and subtypes. So what are some of the different types of users found within Oracle Cloud ERP? Well, first, there's the most common, I think, known as the employee users. So those are the people in operations that use the software to create transactions. They have limited data access. So they have to be granted access to things like business units. And they largely will create transactions and run reports. Then you have kind of a variation of that. So you have something called a contingent worker user. And so they're similar to above in that they have limited data access, but they also have limited transaction access, like to create a requisition. So here's the concept. Let me give you an example. I have a customer and they have an employee user that is a buyer who drafts a contract, but their legal is external. So those lawyers are not employees, so they can't be employee users, They have to be what's called a contingent worker. And so they're a different type of user. All right. Now, the next would be supplier users. So, or customers if they came through a portal. But think about suppliers. This could be a bidder, somebody bidding on a sourcing event. This could be somebody who has a PO, wants to enter an invoice through the portal, supplier portal. And so they're the same as above, limited access. They can create view or respond to other transactions. They're largely coming through the portal, but their data is limited to transactions for just them as a supplier, which makes sense. You wouldn't want Ford coming through the portal and being able to see GM or FedEx or whoever's other transactions. And then lastly, you have the consultant users like me. I go configure the application. So in that one, it's a little interesting. The data is wide open. So I can see all the data, but I can't, as delivered by Oracle, unless I put other roles in there, I can't create transactions. So there's some of the types and subtypes. Now, who are these users and what do they do within Oracle Cloud ERP? So let me give you a little bit of an example of most of those users. So first, initiators of transactions. We have a buyer, and I'm going to use the example of a contract, right? So the buyer comes in, they author the terms. Then what do they do with those terms? They take them and they can either send them as a Word document in an email, or they can expose the contract to a supplier who comes through the supplier portal so they can see it. And then they can edit the contract that way. So 2 different types of users. And then lastly, let's stay with our contract admin user, whereas now I may need to set up a transition that says, hey, I'm going to put this contract in review status, and I'm going to assign this particular user as contingent or as a regular worker to take a look at the contract while it's in that status until they complete it and pull it out of that status and then move the contract further on down to signatures or approval. So next up, slide 4. How are users added or set up within Oracle Cloud? So this is kind of the meat of the different, let's call them kind of concentric circles, if you will. Let's use 4 pages or methods based on the access. So first, let's talk application access. So this is the core Oracle Cloud user. You have to set them up. You give them access to pages through roles. Roles also work with workflow and more. Then you have business access, not business unit. These are think of core values, often come from HCM systems. So it could be department, your manager, could be the type of user you are, the role, right? If you have approval, you might have a grade or a role within there. Next up is data access. So like I said earlier, if you're an employee user, you have to be granted access to the business units. So you can't just see everything. It's very different than, let's say, a PeopleSoft where you could see a lot. This is threaded access by business unit in Oracle Cloud, so you have to have that access granted to you. And then lastly, let's call it transactional access. So for example, in procurement, there's something called a procurement agent. Fancy word. They don't say buyer because it could also be a requester, but and PeopleSoft, I think they had this called operator preferences. So this is an example where, do I want this user to see all these this requester to see all these other requesters' requisitions? Or do I want it to only be in a business unit? Or do I want it to be no other recs you can see? And so you would obviously use business units, which is data access, if you wanted to break apart the business units the requester could see. But if I decided I want this requester to not see anyone else's recs, I would use transaction level access. So those are kind of four of the big accesses. The first is a security console page. The second is what's called manage users, which is where you determine that. The third is data access for a user. It's where you fix that or correct or set those values. And then the last one really depends on the application you're trying to secure the transactions from. Like I said, in procurement, you see that in Procurement Agent. So that's how you add users and a little bit more about the information for the different types of users. Have more questions? Great. Reach out to me directly using the link below. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.